All right, here we go. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. Dave Loughran, Sal Vetri, NBA, DFS, talking basketball. 9 games here on Wednesday, March 4th. Happy to have everyone with us as always. The first thing, though, before we get into anything whatsoever, is this slate. I know I'm not with Josh today, so maybe it won't go for 17 hours, but Sal, there is so much in these early games. The Boston news in and of itself is really one of the craziest full team injury reports we've waited on all season long.
Yeah, and like I did all the just projecting and minutes and all that pretty much last night, like 90% of it. Saw that Kemba was ruled out for today. Kind of made some sense, but did not see half the starters get injured, one get ejected. So all that stuff over the past hour been projecting for, and that game in general, Boston and Cleveland, is going to be just wild.
It's going to be crazy. We're going to get into all of it. Yesterday was nuts too. I mean, Washington erased a 27-point deficit in the third quarter. 9 minutes it took them. They were down by 27 at half. I think it was 76-49 at half. They erased that. Crazy. They ended up losing, but still. Minnesota took out New Orleans. You want to talk about huge dogs winning outright? Minnesota beat New Orleans. Celtics lost. They gave up almost a 20-point lead, lost in overtime, and in the process lost half of their players. And then Washington almost got it done. But the big one, the Golden State Warriors beat the Denver Nuggets. Not only did they beat them, this wasn't like a last-second three-point heave. They smoked them in the fourth quarter in Denver at the Pepsi Center. What a wild night it was if you're a DFS player or particularly a sports bettor. Man, if you had a read, I don't know how you would on a game like Golden State, but man, it was just some of the most lopsided games you'll ever see between good teams and really bad teams.
Yeah. Last night's slate was just it almost seems like tonight will end up being crazier from a DFS perspective, at least heading up to it. But yeah, you were telling me all this stuff in terms of the Wizards erasing that lead in 9 minutes. Just crazy.
It's really nuts. Anyway, the sponsor, as you know, of the Strategy Show is Superdraft. Superdraft.io, or download it in the App Store. There's no salaries there, as they like to say, as we all do. Complete lineup freedom. What do I mean by that? I'll tell you. If you wanted to go ahead and play Luka Doncic today and pair him with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Bradley Beal and Damian Lillard, who will make his triumphant return, you could do that, no problem. But that's not necessarily the way to go about it, because these players have multipliers, which means that a Luka Doncic would have a 1x multiplier. Whatever he scores is exactly what you get. If he scores 60 fantasy points, you get 60 fantasy points. With other players, though, it's different. You're multiplying their fantasy production by whatever their multiplier is. For example, D'Angelo Russell is 1.3 multiplier today. CJ McCollum, 1.35. Dinwiddie, 1.45. And the list goes on. Particularly speaking about Boston players, it gets insane. But because Superdraft waits till 7:30 to lock so everyone can jump into the contest and get their second sweat of the day going, that game's not on the slate. Makes things a little bit easier, but we're still going to break all of it down. Again, superdraft.io, or download it in the App Store. And if you're doing that, if you haven't done it yet, be sure to use the promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, when you sign up and deposit $100 or more. You'll get $20 immediately in free super cash to be used on the site. Good as money to be used on the site to win and play real money and bolster that bankroll. That's AWESEMO. Use that promo code when you sign up and deposit $100 or more. Go to superdraft.io or check it out in the App Store. $36,000 jump shot tonight, $7K up top to first place, $12 entry. If you haven't done it yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. All right, Sal, you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so 9 games, and there's it's going to be a complicated one. Let's put it that way. Before we do, I don't have the screen share, but I will just tell you, last night the winning lineup from last night was, let me pull this up real quick. All right. Come on, help me out here. It's freezing on me. Well, what are you going to do? I thought I had it pulled up. I did. And now I don't. Chris 26 ended up winning it with, is that right? 366 fantasy points. Highest owned player, Jordan McLaughlin. Malik Beasley. That game, unreal, by the way. There was over 270 points scored in regulation.
Yeah, I saw that. It was just crazy. And it's nuts that like the 130 implied total for the Pelicans, like they get there, but then you have just Minnesota going for what, nearly 140.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so the winning lineup was Jordan McLaughlin, Kobe White. Let's see here. 1 second. Screw it, man. You know why? I got Sal. You want to talk about how unprofessional I am right now? I got the wrong damn day pulled up. It's like, dude, Kobe White was not on yesterday's slate. My apologies, guys. Please forgive me. Yeah, it's like that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But yeah, the winning line. My guess is okay. How about if you had to guess what the highest scoring, lineup was from yesterday? What would you put it at?
Highest scoring lineup?
Yeah, the winning lineup. What would you say it scored?
On DraftKings Day, there was a ton of 50-plus burgers. Somewhere, I would guess 380s.
Okay, so it was
370s. I'm looking, yeah, because
365, right? On DraftKings, at least. 365. This person only played 3 lineups. Drew Holiday, Cody Martin, McDaniels, Chris Boucher. By the way, I mentioned that on the deeper dive. This was going to be the day that Boucher comes out and puts up big numbers. Naz Reid, are you kidding? D'Angelo Russell, Zion Williamson, and Anthony Davis.
Yeah, that'll do it. A bunch of 45-plus burgers. Wow.
11% owned Holiday. This is on the Big Jam, 100K to first on DraftKings. 20% Martin, 3% McDaniels, 1% Boucher. There it is right there. 1% Naz Reid, 16% D'Angelo Russell, 37% Zion, and 5% Anthony Davis. So, wow. That's crazy. Collective ownership, 94%. All right.
Damn.
Well, that'll do it. Let's go ahead and move on to this slate then. I just wanted to get that out of the way. So, all right, Josh is certainly more prepared on the Fantasy Cruncher lineup study than I am, but we got it out of the way. It only took a little while to do so. Milwaukee, Indiana. How about this? The Bucks are so good that even though this is a Pacers team with a solid record, 5th right now in the Eastern Conference, they're 11-point dogs on the road today. Milwaukee just keeps opening with these monster spreads, and in many cases covering. They have a 116.5 total, 105.5 for the Pacers, and a 222 over under. I don't know what to make of them right now. Victor Oladipo is questionable. I don't really think whether he's in or out, it's going to change the line all that much, or really the direction of this game. He's got that knee soreness that he's been dealing with, and we'll pay close attention to that. But really, Aaron Holiday last time out played 35 minutes and basically did nothing. 16 fantasy points in 35 minutes. We'll start with Milwaukee, though. On this slate, you have several guys that are priced up, whether it's Giannis Antetokounmpo, Luka Doncic, Bradley Beal's up to 10-6. This DraftKings will hit on everything for FanDuel, too. Lillard's up above 10K now. Whiteside's at 9,500. D'Angelo Russell above 9,000 as well. Do you see reason to get to Giannis today against the Pacers?
Yeah, I think so. Just put all the value that we're going to end up having. Just if at least the way that I'm looking at it right now, you're going to have a ton of just open money to be able to get up there. He does grade out fine for me. I gave him 32 minutes in a game that at least seems like it should stay close. We've seen him play 33, 34 as of late as well. So, yeah, I think I have the most interest from this team in Giannis right now. You're seeing Middleton's price point kind of drop a little bit to a spot where it's starting to become more appealing. The biggest thing really minutes-wise factoring when I looked at Milwaukee was just what's happening with Bledsoe, low 20s in minutes last 3 games. There's been blowout run in 2 of those in the fourth quarter where he just didn't play like the final 8 or 9 minutes. He started out the last game only seeing about 9 first half minutes because he had like 3 turnovers in a short span, and it seems like he came right out after that. So I think there is issues with his minutes right now. Like even trying to add it all up, I can't get above 26 taking out blowout run. So I gave him 25 minutes today. He doesn't look as great. Giannis is really the piece that stands out a lot. And yeah, right now he is my highest projected pure points player, which makes sense. So yeah, I'm gonna have interest with all the value that we seem to have.
There's going to be a lot of value opening up. There's no question. Yeah. Just Boston alone, and we'll get to that in a minute. I mean, there's so much there that we're going to have to unpack, and I don't know how long it'll take. There's no real significant injuries for Milwaukee though, other than like Kyle Korver being out and George Hill being probable. That's really all you have. I don't think you can be too worried about a blowout here, first of all. And second of all, Giannis Antetokounmpo's minutes in games that are at least somewhat competitive have really been climbing upwards lately, which is encouraging to see. You know, in even against Detroit, they win by 20. He plays 32 minutes. You've been seeing his minutes, the trajectory move upward, which is encouraging, because if you are going to pay a premium for him, you want to know that if this game is at least relatively close, you can get 33 or so minutes from him at that crazy price point.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, you just get the wild production from him. So I'm fine getting to him. 11,400, I think, is more than a fine price point. The rest of these guys, though, on the team, they're just all in the middling. So still no Kyle Korver. Everybody just ends up getting like low to mid 20s in minutes. I guess DiVincenzo for me right now is in a player pool, but that's not saying too much. He just seems to be the most productive of the Wesley Matthews, Pat Connaughton bunch. George Hill at $4,000 flat is just priced up enough to where if he gets 20 or 22 minutes, I'm not going to have as much interest.
And ownership is going to be pretty interesting on Giannis. We just got our first run of ownership. If you are a member, you check it out at awesomemode.com. If you aren't, you can use the promo code NBA Strategy, get 50% off your first week of Awesemo Plus all access platinum subscription. He's at 14% right now, 9-game slate. That makes sense to me. On FanDuel, Giannis is coming in at 23%. A lot of that with the positional eligibility being small forward there. Let's talk about Indiana. As I mentioned, Oladipo was sidelined last game. I guess you can put him in for this one, but I'm not confident that he's going to play given his, checkered injury past, especially over the past couple of seasons. Aaron Holiday got that start. He was dirt cheap and did nothing. I still think, even that he was the right play there, but now he's up to $4,400 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you've got Holiday weighing in at $3,700, actually cheaper than his brother. But with so much value, almost certainly going to be opening up. A lot of it from Boston, some from Cleveland. How viable is anyone from the Pacers in the discount section today?
Yeah, from the discount section, I'm not really interested in these guys. I do have Oladipo in currently for 29 minutes, but yeah, if he was out, just bump up both the Holidays, McConnell a little bit, and even then I ran a crunch and projected it that way. I get some more of Holiday, but not a ton. So yeah, these cheaper guys are not just going to do it when we get to Boston and Cleveland and some of the other spots. I do have a lot of interest in Brogdon relative to where the first run of ownership came in the single digits. I gave him 35 minutes. I guess 34 might be a little bit more fair, but he's just playing huge minutes since Jeremy Lamb went out. Oladipo's out. That should only ensure him that 35-minute projection even more. Around a 1.1 fantasy point per minute producer this season. The matchup's tough, so that's the only thing that will draw it down a little bit, but just playing huge minutes. I like him. Sabonis in the mid-teens in ownership to start today. Not going to get there as much, but he's back in the 8K range, so he's in a player pool for me, and then I'll always have some of Turner. So Brogdon stands out the most probably in this entire game next to Giannis as guys I would probably be above the field on if it were to lock right now.
I would love if Brogdon was a better three-point shooter, because that's the spot where you can really get to the Bucks. Sure, we talk about this a lot, but they are allowing more 3-point attempts and more made 3-pointers per game than any other team. Now, their percentage allowed, middle of the road, 18th. So, it's not horrible, but more than anything else, they play at a lightning fast pace. They also, Sal, one of the reasons I think they also allow a lot of threes with a low percentage, if you just reason this out, it's very simple. No team in the history of the NBA has had a point differential as large as the Bucks have at this part in the season. Teams are getting so far behind that they have no choice but to chuck up 3-pointers on every possession.
Yeah, so it might just be more of like a volume thing. So, yeah, I mean, I pull up Brogdon. His issue is clearly like 3-point shooting, if anything. Assists are fine. You're getting just a ton of mid-range jump shots, and a lot of them are from long mid-range. So interesting to see if like later in the year, or at least moving forward, if that's something that in his game, he just takes a step back. But the drive rate's still up to like elite numbers around 40%. Yeah, he's probably my favorite thing from this team.
Okay. Let's move it on. Here we go. It's time. Cleveland, Boston. So if anyone hasn't actually looked at injury updates today to get an idea of what's going on, I'm going to break it down for you right now. Now, this is all preliminary stuff. A lot of this is tentative, Sal, but we know that we already know that Kemba Walker is out. He won't be playing the second of a back-to-back today. That's a fact. Yesterday, Brad Stevens said he was going to be limited to 20 to 25 minutes. He played 23 minutes in an overtime game, so he found that right. He settled right in the middle there. Jason Tatum is not going to play. And now you've got Gordon Hayward, who called himself day-to-day. I can only assume he's not going to play. And then it doesn't end here. Jaylen Brown is questionable. In some spots, I'm seeing him as doubtful. He injured his hamstring yesterday, played 35 minutes. This is the second of a back-to-back, this one being on the road. He could easily sit, but it's not done. Marcus Smart tried to come after a ref. Now, he wasn't like actually trying to attack him, but he was trying to get past the defense of one of these assistant coaches, and that doesn't look good. I'm sure they don't take kindly to that. So he's potentially facing a suspension. So you've got Kemba and Tatum out. You've got Brown and Hayward, let's call him doubtful. You've got Smart questionable. That's 5 players. Their entire starting lineup outside of Tice and one bench guy. It's nuts. On the other side, and we'll start with Cleveland, with the home team here, Andre Drummond already ruled out. Darius Garland already ruled out. Alfonso McKinney, while that doesn't sound like anything, you keep getting injuries to the front court and to the forward position, it actually comes into play. He is out. And Tristan Thompson, the big one here, is currently questionable. So the Celtics are still laying 2.5 points on the road. This game has a very, very underwhelming 215 total. But what an absolute debacle this is at 9:50 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, in Cleveland, the last time out, I mean, they had all these same guys out. They had Thompson out. I'm ruling Thompson out right now just from some of the beat writer things I was reading. He's still like experiencing a good amount of pain from knee soreness, but they ran a 7-man rotation. They had 9 bodies available. Matt Mooney and Dean Wade played a minute apiece just at the end of the game in spots where it didn't matter, but they ran a 7-man rotation, which we haven't seen in a while. And it's because of so many injury news. I mean, they still have Dante Exum out for a while, Alfonso McKinney. So yeah, I'm projecting right now. I mean, I gave 9 guys minutes, Matt Mooney and Dean Wade. I gave like 2 to 4 minutes apiece, even though they didn't get it last game, just to avoid giving guys 40-minute projections in this one. But yeah, if Tristan Thompson is indeed out yet again, I mean, I think you could expect 35 plus minutes for Chetty Osman, Kevin Porter Jr., Larry Nance. Kevin Love should flirt with around 32 plus minutes at a low number. So I think you can feel really good about the value on these guys. Their price points did not come up all that much, especially if they're going to play huge minutes. So with Thompson out right now, I'm projecting it for 36 minutes for Sexton, 35 for the Nance's, Porters, Osmonds, 33 for Love. And they all look like fine options. Even Dellavedova, I gave 28 minutes or 25 minutes off the bench. He looks like an okay option.
So to get in this a little further, Colin Sexton played 40 minutes, almost. Larry Nance played 39.5. Kevin Love played 31 minutes, 32. Kevin Porter Jr. played 41. Or no, I'm sorry. Sexton played 40. Nance played almost 40. Is that right here? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then Porter played 41. Chetty Osman played 40. And Jijic played 17. You mentioned Dellavedova. He played 29. Don't count Mooney. Don't count Wade. Like you said, that game at that point with less than a minute left was out of reach. So if Thompson sits, I'm probably not going to give them 40, but I'm most likely giving them all 37, 38 minutes here, because if you're going to do that last game against the Jazz, and now you're only 2.5 point dogs at home in front of a home crowd that's been tortured all season long, I don't see why JB Bickerstaff wouldn't continue to run them for big minutes. But I'll take a step back. I'd feel a lot more comfortable saying that I at least know young players, developing players like Colin Sexton and Kevin Porter Jr. are definitely going to get huge minutes no matter what.
Yeah, and like my minutes projections on these guys are like 36 now. A piece I just gave them is probably low, but I'm getting so much of them at this point that just leaving them a little bit lower, I guess, opens me up to getting more Boston and any other type of value that opens up. So yeah, the realistic outcome is probably like these guys all get 38 minutes again. If Thompson is in, then you definitely see a drop for Nance and Osman, but it's still then probably an 8-man rotation. So 35 plus minutes for most of them is still in play.
Yeah, if we're ruling Thompson out, then it does change everything. And right now I do have him out. It's a matter of how much are you willing to pay for these guys against Boston. But listen, Boston defensively is really, really bolstered by guys like Tatum and by guys like Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, who we don't know if he's going to be active or not. Now you're talking about a completely 100% revamped rotation. Not the same defensive team. Good coaching, sure, but that's not going to be enough. It definitely opens things up a ton. Is Larry Nance, if Thompson's out? This is what I'm getting at. Like if Thompson's out, Larry Nance is $6,500 on DraftKings, $54 on FanDuel. Once again, the pricing's wild. $6,500 on DraftKings, though. I mean, if you're giving him that many minutes, and I don't see any reason he wouldn't, I think you have to have some interest in Larry Nance, who is basically a fantasy point per minute guy on the season to begin with.
Yeah, if I give so right now, if I give Larry Nance, so Thompson out, if I give him 30 or 36 minutes, he ends up grading out as, just adjusting it, he'd be my 8th favorite play on the slate. So yeah, I'd have a good amount, 37 fantasy point projection.
There you have it. So with Boston, unless you have anything else on Cleveland.
No, that's about it. Right now, as it stands, every single thing looks good for Cleveland, and that's with me giving like 6 minutes to Mooney as well, and those guys who only saw one in the last game, just to try and pull it down a little bit. So all those starters look good. The favorites for me would end up being Porter Jr., Osman, and Nance.
Okay. So Boston will still have some bodies. I'm going off of the ESPN roster. So let's just say all of the guys that are questionable or doubtful end up being out. We already know Kemba and Tatum are out. Let's say Hayward and Brown are out, and we'll say Marcus Smart it doesn't play. I think Marcus Smart obviously has a better chance of playing than everybody else, but let's assume he doesn't for a moment, just for the sake of conversation. You've got Carson Edwards, Taco Fall, Javonte Green, Enes Kanter, Romeo Langford, Semi Ojeleye, Vincent Poirier, Daniel Tice, Brad Wanamaker, Tremont Waters, Grant Williams, and Robert Williams. Let me read that again. Listen to these names, all right? There's a decent amount of them, about a dozen. Carson Edwards, Taco Fall, Javonte Green, Enes Kanter, Romeo Langford, Semi Ojeleye, Vincent Poirier, Daniel Tice, Brad Wanamaker, Tremont Waters, Grant Williams, and Robert Williams. That's what you're working with. Even if Smart plays, add him to the mix. I don't care. I mean, that's just insane.
Yeah, I went about it by leaving Smart in just because of, at that point, like I have Smart for 36 minutes right now. And if I end up, then like either way, I don't see how he doesn't project out for somewhere around 34 plus if he plays. Giving those 36 minutes now to guys who are already getting a good amount of minutes, like Carson Edwards, Langford, Javonte Green. I guess the only guy that if Smart was out, I think Tremont Waters would end up seeing just a lot more run. Like right now, I'm barely giving him any minutes. He's been like the guy who just even last night when there was a ton of injuries just doesn't get off the bench. We haven't seen him really play all that much. He's behind guys like Langford since Langford came back from injury and Edwards. But yeah, if Smart was out, I guess Waters would be the guy who sees like the biggest bump from no minutes or very low to maybe sees the high teens or 20s and then siphon off minutes to other players. But the way I'm projecting it right now, and this is just to start the day, hopefully we get a lineup not like 5 minutes before lock so we can get something going from that. But I have Smart and Wanamaker playing the 1 and the 2, wherever they end up being. Javonte Green at the 3, Grant Williams the 4, Tice at the 5, but it could just as easily be Semi at the 4 and then Williams or Green at the 3.
Yep. So your starting lineup in the second half yesterday was Brad Wanamaker, Javonte Green, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, and Daniel Tice. That's what it was in the second half, or the third quarter. Kemba Walker didn't start the third quarter, and Gordon Hayward didn't return after halftime. So you saw Wanamaker and Green in the rotation. Now, to be a little to bring this into focus, Javonte Green, and I found this strange. Javonte Green did not play in the fourth quarter, but then he played the entire overtime period. But that's also, so here's the thing though, that's also because Jaylen Brown was out in overtime. Dude, their overtime, listen to this. The guys that they played in overtime were, and I think actually that Popcorn Machine has this wrong because they don't have the full minutes there. They have Ojale getting the full run, Wanamaker, Javonte Green. They have Carson Edwards and Marcus Smart splitting 5 minutes. Where's the fifth one come from? Was it Daniel Tice? If you pull up Popcorn Machine, you'll see what I'm saying here.
Yeah, I've got it up right now for overtime. They only have 4 guys on there.
Right, they have 20 minutes there. They don't have 25.
The Semi Ojale played the whole fourth, but yeah, they don't have everything going.
No, I know he did, but that still only makes it 4 5-minute rotation.
Like they only ended up giving 5 guys minutes on Popcorn Machine, but it only adds up to like 4 players.
Right. Well, it shows Edwards coming in for Marcus Smart.
Yep. So
I don't know. We can pull that up. It might sound irrelevant, but it you can kind of glean some information from that, knowing that Brown and Walker are likely out. Well, Walker is out, and that Hayward didn't return. So
yeah, it had to be Tice because they only have him at 22, but he finished with 27 minutes.
Okay, there you have it. So you had your we'll call it a closing lineup was, my God, Brad Wanamaker, Javonte Green, Carson Edwards, and Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart didn't play much though. He got ejected. Semi Ojale and Daniel Tice, and we're going to be seeing a lot of that today.
Yep. Yeah. So like that's the biggest thing for me is trying to figure out. And I guess based on what you're seeing here, maybe I'll end up projecting Semi to start at the 4 instead of Grant Williams.
All right. So if you had to make the call right now, let's say Marcus Smart is playing, right? Who are you giving the abundance of minutes to? Wanamaker has to play 30 plus, right? Yeah. Tremont or Javonte Green has to, you would think he would get some minutes. The guys that didn't really play at all, Romeo Langford still only played 7 minutes in that game. Everyone got something. I don't believe Waters. I'm assuming he's on the roster still because ESPN has it, but he didn't play at all. So I don't know, man. Go ahead. I really don't. It's we need to know the Smart news, but as of now, we'll just assume he's in.
Yeah. So like right now, I gave Smart 36 minutes. I gave Wanamaker 32, and then I gave Javonte Green 30, and that's the assumption that he starts at the 3. Tice 28. So the center minutes should be pretty stable. Tice 28, Cantor 16, Robert Williams 8. Williams played 10 last night. And then it starts to get tricky with these backup guards and really who starts at the 4. So for me, whether it's Grant Williams or Semi, I'll probably give them 28. I'll give the other one 22 to 24. I gave Romeo Langford 18, and I gave Carson Edwards 16.
All right. We might be completely revamping all of this by 4 o'clock, but
Yeah, and like the way that looks is, I mean, Marcus Smart going to see a huge production boost. He looks fantastic. Brad Wanamaker is going to probably be chalky, and seems like every single time that happens, it's awful. But he looks fantastic, and Javonte Green looks great as well. Whoever starts at the 4 will look good. They're like approaching the flat minimum today. So I guess one thing to take from this game is it's on paper now that Boston's all hurt. Two terrible teams. And we've seen it a couple of times this year that like the totals are going to be really low in this game. It's a bunch of unproductive players. So they're at price points that make it hard for them all to fail. But like if ownership is like 6 of these guys from this game are in the top 10 in ownership, you can start to get away from it just on the fact that like these are not great players. And we've seen it before. Like it can just end up absolutely going to shit.
Yeah, it can. And it's, I decided I would look up if any of these guys have played minutes with Walker, Brown, Tatum, and Hayward off the floor. Brad Wanamaker has played 86 minutes, 0.73 fantasy points per minute. So good job there, pal. Javonte Green, 0.89 in 88 minutes. But this really does not mean much at all. All of these guys have been wildly underwhelming in the opportunity they've been given. But it's such a small sample that you can't read into that at all. You just can't. These guys are going to play an entire game without them. And mind you, Sal, we'll leave it at this. I'll let you close this game out. We can't forget, this is a Cleveland team that could very potentially be they're without Andre Drummond already. They could also be without Tristan Thompson, leaving them with Kevin Love as their defense, as their rim protector. I mean, good luck.
Yeah, exactly. And like, it's just a clearly appealing game from all the opportunity that's going to go around and the price points on these guys. But just to close that out on the Boston side, what we're at least expecting right now, and this makes sense, but four of their top 5 assist guys have a chance of being out tonight. Those are players who just create opportunity for other players. So when you have a bunch of guys on the court tonight that are not great basketball players, at best backups in the league, relative to just NBA starters, and now they're going to have to just create their own shots, it becomes sort of an issue. So, yeah, the guys approaching the flat minimum, if they're starting like Javonte Green and Wanamaker at this point, seem fine, but I guess just caution overall.
All right. I think that's a pretty decent breakdown for the information that we have to work on.
Yeah, we got some early morning minute projections for now until we get any other news. I'm waiting at the noon for the bomb to come that Marcus Smart has been suspended.
I know it's possible. It wouldn't. Yeah. I went back and watched that replay a couple times. I'm kind of torn on it. Not necessarily sure what's going to happen, but if he's out, then everything is crazy. Last question I'll ask: if Marcus Smart is not suspended, are you assuming Brad Stevens gives him his normal rotational minutes, or does he play like 40 minutes and just do everything in this game? Because he's up to $7,000 on DraftKings, $6,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, as of right now, I would expect to get a good amount of him. So I gave him 36 minutes, and yeah, I think I think like 35 would be almost a low number for him if he was just going to get normal run here. He just has to do everything like you said. He'll become more ball dominant at that point, and like he's around a 1.15 fantasy point per minute producer with just Kemba and Tatum off the court in around 270 minutes. I can only imagine it gets better when you're taking Brown and Hayward, guys who are over a fantasy point per minute projection off the court as well. So like he'll be like around a 1.2 guy, if not higher for me today. And in 36 minutes, yeah, he's going to grade out really well. So I'll end up getting a lot of Marcus Smart.
The guys that I have most faith in, not to produce, but to get the minutes, because at this rate, trying to guess the production is close to impossible. Yeah. But Marcus Smart, I would expect Wanamaker to play 30 plus. I would think Green gets close to 30. But also keep in mind that I don't think Brad Stevens will have any problem running out like 11 or so guys. This isn't going to be a Cleveland 7-man rotation at all. So be cautious that you don't go in here assuming that certain guys are going to get the lion's share of minutes. That's the one spot that I would be a little bit careful about.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Detroit and OKC. That game took us rightfully so, but man, that took a long time. So the Oklahoma City Thunder are 7-point favorites on the road. Another 215 total. There are a bunch of low totals today. 4 or 5 below 220. They have an implied total right now of 111, 104 to the Pistons. We'll start with Detroit. The only real noteworthy injury news here is that Bruce Brown is unlikely to play. What are you doing with them against a good enough OKC defense?
Yeah, another just banged up team. So Bruce Brown doubtful. Derrick Rose is supposed to miss the next week. So you're just taking bodies off left and right.
And Reggie Jackson's in LA.
Yeah, Reggie Jackson's in LA. Brandon Knight's questionable. I put Brandon Knight in, gave him 30 minutes, but we saw last time out, Svi and Tony Snell played huge minutes. I have them both I have Svi at 34, Svi at 34. I have Tony Snell at 35 here. It makes them both look like, okay, more interest in Svi, but it's Derrick Rose 30% usage now off the court. Christian Wood just stands out as a fantastic option. I have him at 1.27 fantasy points per minute today. I have him at 35 minutes overall. It'll be interesting that what happens with Brandon Knight. Like, I would never think that it matters all that much. And with all the other value from the game we just talked about, maybe it doesn't. But if he's out, you'll have Langston Galloway just being forced into probably mid-30s in minutes at 3,600. That seems nice. Probably makes Sekou Demboye have to play somewhere in the mid to high 20s. Eric Walton Jr. is now on this back in the rotation, could play 20 minutes. So where I'm at right now is that Christian Wood is a pretty strong play for me. I think Svi looks like a pretty strong play at 3,900. And after that, I'll have some shares of guys like Galloway and Knight, but they'll probably get edged out by the Boston and Cleveland guys.
There are so many moving parts from this team throughout the year. First, Blake Griffin goes down. Yep. Then Andre Drummond gets traded. Then Reggie Jackson's gone. And when I said notable news to watch, we knew that Derrick Rose is going to be out for a few weeks, but I'm glad you brought that up. And I guess you know what? I think you're right. As a result, the Brandon Knight news is actually more than relevant. So no Drummond. He's in Cleveland. Griffin's done for the year. Jackson's gone. Derrick Rose is hurt. Bruce Brown's doubtful. And if there are a few teams that are more in flux than this one, it's funny because Christian Wood has been a phenomenal per minute guy, and that was before this season. Whenever he got opportunities, Wood usually produced solid numbers. He's a double-double machine. His price is, I'd say it's reasonable for someone that's going to play 35 minutes in a competitive game. Let's just a little bit further evaluate this backcourt. I'll set it up for you. You can close it out because it's a really tough one to try and narrow down. Bruce Brown, let's assume he's out. Reggie Jackson's gone. Derrick Rose is out. And Brandon Knight is dealing with that quad injury. So if Brandon, do you have Brandon Knight in?
Yeah, I have Brandon Knight in right now for 30 minutes. Okay.
What are you giving guys like Walton and Galloway and Kyrie Thomas?
So I ended up giving Walton 14. I ended up giving Galloway 28 and Thomas just the filler 4 minutes.
Okay. Any priorities here?
Christian would be a priority for me. That's about it from this game. If Brandon Knight ends up being out, probably not a priority, but if Langston Galloway is not going to pick up ownership because of all that Boston value, he's like a 0.7 fantasy point per minute guy, like a lot of those Boston guys, and should play 30-plus minutes just like them. So maybe not as much usage, but I think he'll be a decent pivot if he's not owned.
Oh, no Tony Snell, huh?
Tony Snell gave 35 minutes, and I just he's
I'm joking, by the way. I don't blame you for not mentioning Tony Snell.
Yeah, he grades out for 20 fantasy points, 41. I'm just probably not going to get there.
Mikhailuk's going to play some decent minutes here.
I gave him 34.
It's just a matter of whether or not he can do anything with them. On the OKC side, and if you're playing today, by the way, pay very close attention to all these developments throughout the day. Make sure to tune into the Deeper Dive live before lock. I wouldn't bother playing if you were planning on setting a lineup and then jumping back to your computer to make updates to it 15 minutes before lock. I just think there's going to be way too much happening. So on the OKC side, the only real news here is Danilo Gallinari, and I'm expecting him to play. So they're at, full strength. Yeah, full strength for the guys that you would have expected to be in. What are you doing with them? Is there anybody that stands out? A sub 6K Dennis Schroeder got up 19 shots yesterday. That was encouraging. Chris Paul, Gilgeous Alexander. Adam and I mentioned on the Deeper Dive yesterday that these guys are all pretty decent, but it's difficult to tell which one is ever going to have the decent game. There's not a specific spot where you're like, this one's way better for Paul than it is for SGA, or way better for Schroeder than it is for Chris Paul.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like they're just all appropriately priced at this point, and there hasn't been a ton of injuries to this team. So it's not like we're getting like all the other teams we've talked about so far, just some sort of pricing discrepancy. So the one who does stand out the most would be Dennis Schroeder. I mean, all these guys are between Chris Paul, Schroeder, and SGA right now. They're shooting great on the year. Schroeder has a 54% effective field goal percentage. He stands out. If you put him around 30 minutes, a fantasy point per minute producer. He's the guy I like the most from this team. I have in the player pool Gallo and Chris Paul and Steven Adams. Adams, I put at 28 minutes. If you end up giving him like 30, or maybe he plays a little bit more than that, he'll look great. The only reason that I think 28 might be his ceiling tonight is this Detroit team is just banged up everywhere. They're not going to play all that big. They probably have Sekou Demboye on the court for mid-20s in minutes. So I'm not sure how much they have to keep Adams out there for. Might be a little bit better for Noel. So my priorities from this team are going to be Schroeder, Paul, and then if you want to take shots on a guy like Noel and maybe he sees the 20s in minutes tonight, it could happen at 3,400.
Yeah, I guess the only advantage going to Detroit is that the Oklahoma City Thunder are playing their second of a back-to-back after getting their doors blown off by the Clippers at home. A lot of teams on back-to-backs today, as a matter of fact, and we'll get to those. Is that all you have for OKC?
Yeah, they're consistently getting the exact same minutes from their starters, and they're priced for it at this point.
Let's talk about the Knicks then and the Utah Jazz. Utah Jazz coming in this one on this East Coast road trip. They're favored by a healthy margin, 8 points now, 218.5 total. Another one sub 220, which makes sense given the conditions between these two teams that play at a crawling pace, or at least not a fast pace enough to spark or spur a ton of interest. We'll kick it off with the Knicks, though. Julius Randle continues to sit below $8,000 on DraftKings, which is pretty interesting. He's going to play pretty solid minutes, although I was surprised he only played 30 against Houston, 25 against Charlotte last week. So I do have some concerns there that he isn't locked into 35 minutes a night like he was before, but we can discuss that, Sal. Mitchell Robinson finally bursting onto the scene. It took long enough. Playing much better basketball lately, limiting his foul trouble. I'm not surprised he only played 24 minutes last game against a super small Houston squad, but still played well enough. He's questionable today with a left hamstring injury. Let's start it off with the front court. I think this is where there's a whole lot more to discuss.
Yeah, so I think so. Right now, I gave Mitch Rob 25 minutes. I have him in a tougher matchup against Utah, but I would expect him to at least remain on the court for a good amount of it, just the way that Utah plays. Rudy Gobert hanging around the basket, a little bit more of a traditional center. Not as interested in him. If he's out, it would make Bobby Portis, if he ends up starting, a better play. Taj Gibson's been seeing minutes, so those guys would see the bumps for me. But Randall's really the interest here for me at 7,700. I only gave him 32 minutes, and he still looks good. The minutes have been a little bit down as of late. And Utah, I mean, naming from last year, great defensive team, but over the last 10 games, they're the second worst defensive rating team in the league. On the season, they're 12th best, so it's just a really crazy stretch and a little bit of uncertainty to why that happened. Might be smaller sample, but Randall at 32 minutes ends up looking fine for this team. The rest of the guys, I mean, you'll have Peyton and Barrett playing around 30 minutes, tougher matchups for them individually at their price points. I don't feel the need to get there, but the rest of these guys, it's just a bunch of guys who play upper teens or low 20s in minutes, like Ntilikina, Bobby Portis if Robinson's in, Knox and Bullock. So it's hard to like anything else from here. It'll be Randall for me. If Robinson's out, I'll have more interest in whoever starts between Portis and Taj Gibson.
How about the backcourt and the wing positions? I can't imagine there's anything too enticing here from New York.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've been seeing Barrett play a lot better as of late, and he's getting the minutes as he's gotten healthier. The thing that's really nice about RJ Barrett is he just loves to drive. Like, he's finishing at the rim and getting to the rim about 50% of the time. Doesn't shoot from three at all. Bottom 10 percentile for a shooting guard and just guards in the league. But that's good to see that he's getting to the basket, so you get consistency there. But now he's facing one of the best shot blockers and rim protectors in the league in Rudy Gobert, and he's priced up to 5,800. So right now, Barrett doesn't seem appealing for me. His biggest strength is the defense that he's facing is also biggest thing that they stop. So no interest in this backcourt for me. It'll really just be Randall and whatever happens if any value opens up at center for them.
Barrett's shooting a little bit more from three, but not something that's sustainable. And also, he's just not a particularly good 3-point shooter at all. On the Utah side, I don't know what's going on necessarily with Rudy Gobert. I mentioned this on Monday's strategy show, but listen to this, dude. You're talking about a player that's averaging 14 rebounds per game. I guess you see where I'm going here with this. At halftime, he had 2 rebounds against the Cleveland Cavaliers that were without Andre Drummond and Tristan Thompson. He has now finished with single-digit rebounds in 5 straight games. For someone like Rudy Gobert, who heavily relies on rebounds, block shots to kind of fuel his fantasy production, that is shocking to me. And I would be able to make a much better argument for it if I said, yeah, well, it came against the Sixers with an Embiid and Horford, a big front court there. It came against the Lakers. But no, Cleveland without Drummond, Washington Wizards, Boston Celtics, Phoenix Suns, and you ready for this? The Houston Rockets. Maybe you could say that just a ton of 3-point shooting, scattered rebounds, but what's going on with Rudy Gobert? Is this just fluky, or is there some strange reason that he went from racking up 15-plus rebounds every single night to not being able to crack double digits?
Yeah, I would assume that it's just like a small sample size type of a thing, but like just also looking at some of like the positioning and where he is on the court, not much has changed from looking at cleaning the glass. Like not much has changed is where he kind of pretty much just stands during these games. So I just assume that it's something to do with just rebounding or smaller samples as opposed to what's happening with his rebounding rate. So you get another matchup today. Like it's a big New York front court, but definitely one where they struggle in terms of allowing just offensive rebounds. So I'm going to keep projecting him for like normal rebounding rates that we've seen for the most part of the season. The weight that I'll have on for like the past 10 games might affect it by like a half a rebound at that point. But yeah, I think it's more of a smaller sample thing. It's just weird looking at it because like I'm looking at cleaning the glass and he's like standing in the same positions in all these games.
It's really weird. So I went on to some player tracking data to see if there was anything going on. Over the last 5, he's averaging 19.4 rebound chances per game, 39% contested rebound rate, so 3.2 contested rebounds per game. Keep that in mind. I'm just looking at this right now, so I'm learning as you do. And his deferred rebounds are 1.8 per game, meaning rebounds that he's deferring elsewhere. So, all right, 19.4, 39% contested, or we'll say 3.2 contested boards and 1.8 deferred rebounds per game. Average rebound distance 3.5. All right, so let's pull it up because I'm curious to see what we get here since the start of the season up through before those last 5 games and see what we get. I'm assuming that he has to be averaging more than 19.4 rebound chances per game. Here we go. Utah Jazz, pull it up. 24.3 rebound chances. So that's 5 more per game. Again, this could just be fluky, but it's interesting to look at. Less deferred rebounds, average rebound distance of 4 feet, and 5.2 contested rebounds per game. So 5 fewer potential rebounds per game. The only reason that's strange, and we'll move on, Sal, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's not even like all of these teams he faced are slow. Houston, Phoenix, Washington, just a weird thing. I don't know. Guess we'll see.
It's also not even like his like minutes have come down and he's just not on the court as much.
Right.
And that's why they're dropping. It's just the opportunity's actually been changing. Maybe it's just sample size. I don't, everything that we're looking at, it's hard to see why.
It is. Do you like him today?
So this whole team in Utah, just the way that they're priced is almost like secondary options for me. Like he makes a player pool for me, but he's nothing fantastic. Like he's outside of my top 40. I like him more than Donovan Mitchell on his team, just slightly. The guy that I like the most, though, is probably Bojan at the $6,200 price point. I give him 33 minutes. He has the best matchup against the Knicks today. He probably sees a lot of RJ Barrett and whatever they want to end up throwing out there at the 3 today, just sort of a rotating position for them. But yeah, Bojan's the guy I like the most. Conley, Gobert, Mitchell just all seem like filler secondary value. They all seem to be priced where they should be at this point for what their ceilings are, for what their minutes production that they've been getting. So you no longer have the lower 7K Mitchell. You no longer have a 4K or low 5K Conley. So I'll get the most Bojan here.
Good comment in chat. Adam Bollock says, I don't watch these guys. Their voices are annoying and they aren't the best. Do your research, peasants. Nice to have you hanging out with us at 10 a.m., fella, watching the video. All right, let's keep going. You're right about the price points on a lot of these guys. It's a lot tougher for me to feel good about them on a 9-game slate when there's a lot to like. You even mentioned to me before we started the stream in Slack this morning when I DM'd you and said, man, I am dreading this Boston-Cleveland game. You said, yeah, but there is a lot of good stuff on this slate. How much of that good stuff comes from the Jazz?
Right now for me, well, one, not much. It's really Bojan, and just to show where he kind of grades out. Bojan is my 16th overall play, and then nothing else is like in the top 40 for me.
Okay. Let's move on then. Miami, Orlando. So Miami, pretty heavy favorites here. No surprise, 7 points, 219 total. Another game below 220. I mention this because we're going to get into a couple that are far more appealing from a fantasy standpoint, but we got to kind of get through all of this first. So Jimmy Butler sits below 8K on DraftKings still on FanDuel. He's coming in at sorry, my page just went down. So Jimmy Butler on FanDuel is 7,500. But once again, everyone's pretty much underpriced there. On FanDuel, Bam Adebayo is 8,400. On DraftKings, he's 8,400 as well. Orlando actually hasn't been playing stellar defense recently. If you take them on the season, they're still, one of the better defensive teams in the league. They rank in the top 10. But Jonathan Isaac will remain out. What's weird about Orlando is they're also a bottom 5 offensive team on the season. They also play at a crawling pace. So if you just run it back we'll take it since the start of February and see what type of a team you're dealing with in Orlando, it starts to come into focus. They are still one of the slowest paced teams in the league, averaging 18th, but less than 100 possessions per 48. Their defensive rating, however, balloons to 114.6 over the last 30-point days. So they go from top 10 to bottom 10. They've played better offensively, though. So that's all a way of saying they're actually making for a slightly better fantasy matchup for opponents than they would have earlier in the season because they're playing worse defense and better offense. Is that enough for you to say, you know what, I'm willing to get to some of these Miami Heat players tonight?
Yeah, that is partially. And like, I agree with exactly what you were saying. Like, it is an Orlando team that, similar to like Utah, like all season and last season, we think is like a dominating defense. And due to some injuries and also just the rotation of their backcourt in Orlando this year, it's hard to see them at least being formidable on defense in the same sense. Maybe it shores up with Augustine now back in the rotation. But yeah, it's a spot where Jimmy Butler does stand out for me. He's probably the guy that I like the most from this team in terms of what I'll get to him at 7,800. Gave him 34 minutes, a 1.2 fantasy point per minute producer. He grades out the best for me. Not going to probably get to as much Bam now. I think he's still priced at a point, especially if he's going to be, for a good amount of his run, dealing with Vooch. Not a guy that I plan to get to that much, but Butler stands out. Duncan Robinson at his price point, if he's going to keep playing 30 plus, it's wing value that you're relying on instead of 1 3-pointer made, 3 to 4. So he's in a player pool for me right now. Looks good for around low 20s in fantasy points. The rest of these guys I can probably do without. I mean, Crowder, Nunn, Dragic, they all look decent if you give them 30 minutes. Decent at best, but relative to the slate, guys that I probably stay away from.
Okay. Anything on the other side of this one for the Orlando Magic? By the way, Aaron Gordon questionable, Gary Clark questionable. That's going to play pretty heavily in any decision making you may or any guys you may or may not want to roster.
Yeah, and so right now I put Gordon in. I gave him 36. Hopefully we get news. Not really too confident on that, but I didn't project Gary Clark for minutes either way. So even if he's active, so what this ends up doing for me is that at 8,500, Vooch looks like a fine option just relative to the slate. Getting to other players in that range or just going all the way up to the top end. So I didn't really get too much of him in a crunch. And then the rest of these guys, like if Aaron Gordon's back, it makes Fournier not as interesting. Now you have DJ Augustine coming back into the fold, played 23 minutes, the most he's played since coming back from injury. And what that really did was it just hurt the upside of the minutes for Carter Williams, for Fultz, and for Ross. So all those guys aren't that interesting, but the one who is DJ Augustine. If you told me he plays another 22 to 24 minutes tonight, he's a 0.84 fantasy point per minute producer on the season. I give him 22 minutes. It's like high 18s in terms of fantasy points scored. So it's going to look better as a value rating. I think he looks good as another option, like we were saying with Langston Galloway, as a potential pivot off of just trying to get unique in one or two spots if you're playing a lot of those Boston guys today.
How many Miami Heat players, backpedaling for a second, do you think are projected for over 10% ownership today? If you had to guess.
Over 10, I would guess just Butler, if any.
4.
Oh, wow.
I knew you wouldn't get that because I was shocked as well. So these are preliminary projections. A lot of this updates throughout the day. Keep that in mind. But it's good to have something to reference on the show to get a general idea early on of what we're dealing with. So Butler is definitely the highest, right? He's up around 18%. And then Duncan Robinson and Goran Dragic are both above 12. And Bam Adebayo is right above 10. So kind of strange the way that's breaking down right now. Duncan Robinson is one of the most prolific boom or bust players, mostly bust players in the league. He's going to rip off a ton of threes. He's shooting 44% from long range this season, so that's encouraging. But how many times have we seen him rip off 25 fantasy points in the first half and finish with 27?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like I have him grading out fine. I guess where the ownership is, he would have been the second guy I was to guess. But if the ownership's going to be like average ownership on a 9-game slate, mid-teens, then I'll just have less interest probably.
I will say, though, to circle back on Dragic, if this game's close, he's probably going to get another 32 minutes. Tyler Herro remains sidelined. I mean, it's really not the craziest idea to think that Dragic at a sub 6K price point could make some sense here. Now, I'm still a little bit surprised that he's going to be, or right now he's projecting for that, but 55 on FanDuel. Once again, everyone's too cheap there, so he's probably less appealing. 58 on DraftKings, where pricing is a little bit sharper. 33 minutes from Goran Dragic as someone who's producing north of a fantasy point per minute on the year. That's not all that bad.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think it looks okay. It's just it's like a neutral play for me today. 12% owned. Like I just, that doesn't feel great. I think that he has like the upside. It's just when Butler's out there, it's stronger to see it, which makes sense.
Top plays from this game?
So top plays for me, yeah, it's one of the least appealing games in the slate. For me, it would be Butler from Miami, and then a pretty far drop off to Duncan Robinson. Orlando, not much interest. Honestly, probably DJ Augustine's the most interesting thing from that team.
Okay. We got 5 down, 4 to go. Moving at a decent pace. Brooklyn, Memphis. Kyrie Irving, done for the year. Outside of that, you're not really looking at a ton of injury concerns with the Brooklyn Nets. We'll get to Memphis in a second. Brooklyn, though, is coming off of a overtime victory in which they clawed back from a near 20-point deficit to come away with a win at TD Garden. So props to them. Very impressive game. However, Sal, now they're playing their second of a back-to-back. This game's got a 223 total. They are 1.5-point favorites, and much of that is because Memphis is shorthanded, down Jaren Jackson Jr., down Brandon Clark. They're dealing with some significant injuries of their own. But yeah, a lot of these players, and we can pull it up from yesterday to take a look at what minutes looked like. We already did Boston, but as far as the playing time goes, Karis LeVert played 36 minutes. DeAndre Jordan played 36 minutes. The minutes were actually all over the place for this team. But yeah, Dinwiddie coming in played, I don't know if you noticed this. I'm sure you did. He only played 23 minutes. Kenny Atkinson went wild. And basically, when they started making a bit of a push to get this game competitive, listen to the fourth. Want to hear who was in for the fourth? I'll tell our viewers what the fourth quarter rotation looked like. All of them played the full fourth quarter and overtime. DeAndre Jordan, probably for last-minute purposes of getting a good shot off from deep, was out for like 10 seconds at the end of the fourth. So it was Karis LeVert, DeAndre Jordan, Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot, Kuruks, and Chris Chioza. That is your fourth quarter lineup that brought you out of a 21. It was a 21-point deficit and played the entire overtime period. That does help a lot of guys in the sense that the guys that are usually getting the big minutes didn't get them yesterday. But Prince played 18. Jared Allen played 17. Garrett Temple played 22. Even Spencer Dinwiddie played 23. What a wild rotation Atkinson went with, and it worked.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. I had somebody ask me why did Dinwiddie get benched last night, and he didn't get benched. They just went on a 17-6 and then a 9-0 run all in the fourth quarter to bring the game back. So he just didn't come off. He didn't go back onto the court. And LeVert was just absolutely dominating towards the end of that game and scored all their points in overtime. So yeah, there just really wasn't a chance for him to come back. Sort of a fluke thing. Like I don't expect that to be anywhere near a projected closing line. It's like what you said. You pull somebody out of a 20+ point deficit. You don't change up the momentum and the flow of what that unit's doing. So. Yeah, I mean, LeVert has just been fantastic. You get him now probably going to go. I'm trying to see, is the ownership for this team, I'm assuming he's going to pick up a lot of ownership. So
who are you talking about?
Yeah, LeVert right now projected for just 10%. I like LeVert a lot again. So you get over the last month, and that encapsulates no Kyrie during that time. LeVert's averaging like 1.3 fantasy points per minute. I have him at 1.24 today. I have him at 33 minutes in a fine spot against Memphis. They've been better as of late defensively, but more so around the basket. He looks like a strong play for me. Grades out for over fantasy, right around 40, a little more than 40 fantasy points for me. I gave Dinwiddie another 33, about a 1.18, 1.15 fantasy point per minute producer. I can get away from that, especially since he's more expensive than LeVert yet again. So yeah, LeVert looks like a strong play yet again. He's just the higher usage and higher productive player when Kyrie's off the court and he's actually healthy.
Some people are shell-shocked from that load up on Atlanta Hawks and run them out there against Memphis the other day. What a dreadful experience that was, but we're back at it again with another semi-unpredictable team. But if Dinwiddie's coming in with more ownership than LeVert, and it's going to be close, but still, there's no reason not to like Caris LeVert here. I think I mentioned this last week, but since Kyrie Irving went down, Caris LeVert leads the team in usage, right? He leads the team in scoring. He leads the team in per minute production. This isn't just a fluke of a game or two. He has been the go-to guy. Now, him and Dinwiddie are obviously shouldering the bulk of the offensive load for this team. They don't exactly have many other options. But, yeah, since he went down, LeVert's averaging 1.3 fantasy points per minute, 1.18 for Dinwiddie. Still fine. LeVert, 33% usage, 26% for Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie's got him with the 38% assist rate to Caris LeVert's 25%. But the usage and the per-minute production is firmly in Caris LeVert's favor. And I still think he's too cheap here, as a matter of fact, Sal. $7,200 on DraftKings, particularly at only 10% ownership, is crazy. And need I even mention it? He's $6K flat on FanDuel.
Yeah. All across the board, he looks really good. And then also, like right now on Super Draft, he has a 1.55x multiplier. That is my third best play right now on Super Draft. So he just looks strong everywhere at this point. Yeah, I think he's a fantastic option. Like if you were to build a lineup tonight and even have a Giannis or a Luka up top, like having LeVert with the upside that you saw last night, albeit some overtime, but still 50 points. We've seen it multiple times over the last month with no Kyrie. And now you only have to pay $7,200 for it still. Yeah, I think it's a really strong, if not the best mid-range option in that 7 and 6K range on the slate tonight.
I'll give you something that I found surprising. On the season, in 1,512 minutes with Jaren Jackson on the floor, the Memphis Grizzlies have a 111.5 defensive rating. With him off the floor, it's 106.1. They've been 5 points better, 5.5 points better per 100 possessions with Jaren Jackson off the floor defensively.
Wow.
That shocked me because if you watch him individually, he doesn't seem like a liability, but there you have it.
Is that with Brandon Clark in during that time or during the same stretch that he's been hurt?
No, that's just on the season with Jackson on and with Jackson off, not with both of them off. I didn't want to use just a few games there, but
yeah, that makes sense. Because I was going to say that like it's probably still factoring in a good amount, but they're playing so small. I guess it's at least lately working.
Yeah, it's crazy. So who are your top options from Brooklyn other than LeVert? Is there anybody here that you really like today?
Yeah, it's just always depending on the minutes with Jared Allen. Like I gave him 26 here and he looks fine. I think for this is like we'll get to the Memphis side, but I think this is a really good spot for Allen as long as he stays out of foul trouble because you're going up against Joe Val. And same reason why it's a good spot for Joe Val. There's just going to be 30 locked in minutes of Joe Val at center, I think, tonight, which just helps Allen stay out there with traditional centers a little bit more. He'd be my second favorite play from this team. After that, not really interested in Dinwiddie at the price point. The rest of these guys I could do without.
Okay. Let's talk about the Grizzlies. No Jackson, no Brandon Clark. John Morant last game. Why am I shocked that he underwhelmed? It should be no surprise to anybody. He had a couple solid games and then came back down to earth. He's been a really difficult player to predict, particularly because even in really good spots, he hasn't been great. Now, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. That game was over before it started. He only played 24 minutes. Valanciunas got off to a hot start, played 25 minutes. Had he got his normal run, would have been a huge game, had a 15-15 double-double. So now you've got him up against Brooklyn in a game that has a serviceable 223 total. I personally thought it would be higher. It's not. Are you getting to the price points on? Because for me, Valanciunas is up to 7,800 now. That's not nearly as palatable as it was before when you were getting him at sub 6K or sub 7K, 7,100 on DraftKings. But you think you already alluded to this. The one thing that may be helpful is that no matter what, Brooklyn is going to run out a legitimate big at the center position between Jared Allen and DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that's nice. Like I'm able to project, or at least I am going to, Joe Val for around 30 minutes tonight. And then it makes him like an okay GPP option for me. Nothing that stands out a ton. The thing that's nice, though, since Clark and Jackson have been out, it's a small sample of around 200 minutes, but Joe Val is averaging 1.39 fantasy points per minute. So if he could just stay on the court, he's going to be an absolute force. He has that GPP upside. But you mentioned that he's priced up at this point. Even if I can project him for like 1.3 fantasy points per minute today, he makes a player pool, but around 39 fantasy points is not really going to do all that much in a median projection. So I think he's a better GPP option because of what his ceiling is. He's picking up ownership right now in like the mid-teens, so more of a secondary option for me.
All right, so Karis LeVert's the one guy we really like here. Is this a game that you really like?
Somewhat. So yeah, LeVert I like, and then I do like a good amount of Dylan Brooks and D'Anthony Melton. Continue to just play Melton. 25 minutes is probably what you get with upside on that. He projects out for around 25 fantasy points at 4,500. So I like Melton. I like Dylan Brooks, who keeps seeing 32 plus minutes and has a really high minutes ceiling on him of 36 plus, depending on how the nights go. Them playing smaller is helping him a lot. The issue with Dylan Brooks is he's a guy who doesn't really drive a lot, and he settles for just a ton of mid-range jump shots. But since they've been playing small over the last week or so, his driving rate has gone up a good amount. So that helps him just be more consistent for fantasy. So I think my favorite play from this team right now is Brooks, then Melton, and then start to get into like the Andersons and Joe Val for just GPP options.
Jonas Valanciunas is one of the highest projected owned centers today on DraftKings. Interesting. I guess it's not that surprising, but he's up there, 16%. On FanDuel, you've got Jonas Valanciunas, 7,100, coming in at 26.5%. So he's not going overlooked. I don't think he should, but you just have to hope that Taylor Jenkins is going to look at that opposing lineup and say, all right, I want my legitimate big man out there to counter them on the boards. And let's hope that's the case. If so, I would envision Jonas Valanciunas having a very solid game. All right.
Yeah, exactly. He has a 1.35x multiplier on SuperDraft too, which looks that just is pretty nice for a guy who has a huge ceiling.
That's very appealing. All right, 3 to go. Hey, we appreciate, as I say this every day, you guys making this show and all of the Awesemo programming a part of your daily routine. And you want to help us out, the easiest way you can do so by supporting us is hitting that thumbs up button, liking the video, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell as well. We appreciate all of it every day. And hopefully people keep winning here and hanging with us till the end of the season. Minnesota, Chicago. So the Timberwolves, man, yesterday they somehow beat the Pelicans. I mean, I'm not saying the Pelicans are a juggernaut by any stretch, but this Timberwolves team, I mean, the guys that they've got in the rotation, it's shocking that they continue to hang with certain teams. They beat Miami in Miami. They beat New Orleans in New Orleans. I had messaged Ben yesterday, Jazzraz, and I was like, look at the box score at the first half. It was like 78 to 69 or something. The Timberwolves had shot almost 60% in the first half. Both of these teams were shooting 55% after three quarters. We saw 270 plus points in this game. I just don't know how you can sustain those type of numbers with the guys that you have. And you know what, Sal, maybe I'll eat my words here and I'll be wrong, and it'll turn out that Malik Beasley and Naz Reid and James Johnson and all of these guys are just way better than we ever could have imagined. But they've definitely been running hot lately, to say the least. And now they get a matchup against a shorthanded, bad Chicago Bulls team. Maybe they keep it rolling tonight.
Yeah, I think it's interesting at just what Malik Beasley's been able to do since he's gone over there, and getting the minutes have gone down, though, from his 35 or 36 when he first arrived. Now
I do think he's a good player, to be clear. I think Beasley's a decent enough player.
I agree with that for sure. I have him at 33 today, and this team in general, like, they didn't get the price bump for what happened last night just because the salaries came out in time, but you're still seeing D'Angelo Russell at $9,100, and even if you give him 33, 34 minutes, it doesn't look all that great. And I'm even changing just the projection for him because the defensive projection, because there's no Zach LaVine. Chris Dunn's now done for the year, so it should be a better matchup for him than it would have been a month or two ago. He still doesn't look that great at the price tag. So this team is just a lot of guys who it's hard to judge their minutes. I only have three guys at 30 or minutes: Hernan Gomez, Beasley, and Russell. The rest of them from the Okojis, Reeds, Culvers, all in the mid to low 20s. So no real interest in those guys. For me, it's Beasley. If you think Naz Reid plays in the upper 20s, he will pop a little bit more, especially with what's happening with just Chicago getting Carter back. Maybe Laurie on some sorts of minutes limit should still be an okay matchup for part of those minutes for Reid. But for me, it's just going to be Beasley, over a 0.9 fantasy point per minute producer since he's come over to this team. Have him at 33 minutes in what should be a fine matchup.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny, too, because Naz Reid has been a walking foul out. Averaging basically 7 personal fouls per 36. Played 27 minutes yesterday, was dominant. In all fairness, from a fantasy perspective, he was dominant. 13 points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks, just across the board. Crazy numbers from Naz Reid. James Johnson, meanwhile, coming off the bench, played 21 minutes, all of those backup center minutes, had 19, 6, 5, and 2 and 38 fantasy points. They annihilated, think about this for a second, Sal. I don't want to get bogged down by it because I guess it's unimportant, but they annihilated the Zion William, Derek Favors front court. It's pretty impressive, and they are so much undersized than they are. Both of them combined for only 2 3-pointers, so that's not even where the numbers came from.
Yeah, and like, from a fantasy perspective, like, they're both good fantasy point per minute producers. It's just a matter of, can they stay on the court? And they cut into each other's minutes a lot right now that it's pulling them both down at their price tags. But when it comes to GPPs, like, if you want to try and gain some sort of leverage, if you think Naz Reid or James Johnson, because it's probably not going to be both of them, one of them plays 28 minutes today, then yeah, they're going to look like good options. I have them both around like 25, so it doesn't look as great, but Naz Reid's point per minute production is great. Like, he picks up blocks, he picks up steals in some of the top percentile for his position. So I think if you wanted to sort of take the chance on one of these guys that I would expect to just pick up not that much ownership later today, I think Reed's at least interesting because of the GPP upside if he just sees like an extra 3 minutes in his rotations. The only downside is, like, we're projecting him right now to be one of the highest owned plays in the slate. So yep. I don't feel as secure in his minutes enough to just ride along with like 25% ownership.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's just kind of a fascinating development there when you look at how that game probably should have played out and then how it did play out. So strange stuff. Anyway, let's get to the other side of this one. Chicago going up against the Pels. The one spot the Minnesota Timberwolves. I just cannot buy into the Timberwolves defensively being strong. And yesterday, make no mistake about it, it was not their defense that carried them to a win. They still allowed 134 points in regulation, right? Yeah. They got hammered. But you know, are are they going to go the way? Are they trying to go the way of the Houston Rockets? Just, run a super small lineup and hopefully you can run opposing teams off the floor. They attempted 34 3-pointers, shot 42% from beyond the arc, ran a small lineup most of the game. And does that influence or help Chicago, who will be without really their only quality player in Zach LaVine?
Yeah, I really like the Chicago team today. And there's some question marks. So Otto Porter and Wendell Carter Jr., they said their minutes limits are supposed to rise today. I have Wendell Carter now at 25. I gave Otto Porter 22 minutes. We'll see if we get any more news on that. So makes them both not that appealing. Carter, if he was ultra effective during that time and efficient, would look okay. But I think for GPPs, you're really limiting your ceiling playing a guy who might only play 25 minutes. But yeah, with no Zach LaVine right now, I'm projecting currently Laurie out. He's questionable, and they said hopeful to play. So we'll get more news on that. That won't really affect the backcourt all that much. But yeah, no Zach LaVine. And right now, Minnesota, over the last 10 games, worst team in the league defensive rating. Tomas Satoransky, Thad Young, and Colby White all look like really strong options for me. I have them all right now as top 30 plays on this slate, with Tomas Satoransky and Thad Young is top 25 plays for me. So gave Satoransky, gave Thad Young 33 minutes apiece. Young played 33 in the last one. He's been around 30 to 32, but in a lot of those games, he picks up a foul that makes him come off with a couple minutes left in the second quarter. So if he stays out of foul trouble, the game stays close. I think 33 or at least 32 is sort of his floor in minutes. And then Colby White, he's right now at a fantasy point per minute production on the season.
Yo, Colby White's going to be a stud. I tweeted it the other day. I'm
Yeah.
buying into Colby White.
Yeah, he's just fantastic to watch. Like earlier in the season, we were watching Colby White, and I think he was the guy who he hit 7 threes in a single quarter in the third quarter.
Yep.
And that's all that he was really doing, because he was just behind Chris Dunn, obviously Zach LaVine. But now that he's on the court, like, he's actually showing skill sets. The defensive stuff will come for a younger player, but yeah, he looks fantastic here. Those three guys up top look the best. Your best like GPP option for a ceiling is going to be Colby White. But the ownership at least should follow it. I'm looking at it now. It's in the single digits. I'm going to have a lot more than like 6 or 7% Colby White.
Yeah. The only thing I hate is I'm watching him against Dallas the other night. They beat Dallas, by the way. I'm watching him the other day, and he would drive to the rim, and he'd get to the rim, and he'd score. But he's only averaging 8.9 drives per game since the start of February, which to me is odd. Now, there isn't a player on this team that averages more than 13. That is Zach LaVine. But I would like to see Colby White be a little bit more aggressive with the ball in his hands, because he can get, like, he needs to, if he's driving to the rack 15 times a game, you're going to have more guaranteed scoring from him, which makes him a whole lot more appealing. He's been shooting really well, don't get me wrong, but you need, like, the best type of scoring, the best type of shooting is give me all the threes and all the drives to the rack around the rim within 3 to 5 feet of the basket. That's what makes the most sense. He's attempting, though, 48% of his shots are threes, 26% are within 3 feet of the basket. So that's really not bad. That's what, almost 75% of his shots are from long range or from at the rim. That's fine. I'd like to see him drive a little bit more. But I am encouraged by another thing when it comes to Colby White. His potential assists have been increasing, and they've been increasing significantly lately. That's important because earlier in the year, this was somebody who was completely reliant on scoring. If he wasn't scoring, you were toast. Colby White was basically empty stats for most of the day. But now he's averaging 7 potential assists per game since the start of February. You run it back over the last few weeks, it gets even more impressive. Over the last 3 weeks, he's averaging, I think, 8. So I'm on board with that. Takes LaVine off the floor, and it makes him even more appealing. So White's played 133 minutes over the last month without LaVine, averaging 1.36 fantasy points per minute.
Yeah, I just updated his rates because I had him around like a fantasy point per minute still. And so this is what Zach LaVine on the court over the last month, but he's at 1.17 in 300 minutes with LaVine on the court. So yeah, keeping him at 1 fantasy point per minute is just way too low now that you're going to have LaVine's 1.3 minutes off the court. I updated his rates. I put him to like a low number of what he probably ends up today. and he popped to being my 6th overall play today.
Well, how about this? Even with Levine off the floor all season long, he's a 1.09 fantasy point per minute guy with a 27% usage rate and a 20% assist rate.
Just crazy. Yeah, like those are like the baseline numbers that I had him in at. And yeah, now changing it for Levine it's like he's going to be that as a floor. And like you said like what? It was like a 1.3 plus.
1.36 over the last month.
Yeah, I only imagine that his drive rate's going to keep going up. And that's like the biggest thing. When you see players shooting from 3 and driving, that is the best thing you can see from fantasy producers. So like, that's why Harden's so fantastic. And obviously he's just better for other reasons, but that's like the best, I would say like predictor of just continued fantasy success. So he's like around the average, like you were saying, like drive rate right now is 50 percentile in the league. It's only going to get better as he gets older. But yeah, for today, he's going to look like at worst for me today, he'll be my 6th play as of right now at worst.
I really like Kobe White today.
Yeah.
Really, really like Kobe White. Somebody mentioned in chat after one game, we're all on Kobe White. No, man, this is definitely more than one game. He's playing really well, and I don't mind jumping on. Mind you, by the way, Zach LaVine was only out for one of those games.
Yep.
So, yeah, take that for what it's worth, but I'll happily.
All February.
What's that?
I think he has like 7 or 8 games of 35 or more fantasy points in February alone.
Yeah. Over his last 5 games, he ranks 9th in league scoring. So that's good. And it's going to continue. There's no reason that it wouldn't continue. At least the usage. If the production comes out fine, but the usage and the minutes should be there. And that's really all we're trying to predict here.
Yeah. If you like, and knows Zach LaVine, but if you just take the average over his last 5 games with LaVine on the court for 4 of those, he would be a 6x plus player today from a fantasy perspective.
All right. I know, it's crazy. Let's keep it moving. 2 to go. Dallas and New Orleans. Big total here. New Orleans Pelicans on the road, 238.5 total. They're 5.5 point dogs. What are we thinking with the Dallas Mavericks? Luka and Porzingis both going to be in action here, and both of them are playing, is what I mean. The Pelicans coming off a bad home loss, which, by the way, that 8th seed in the West is kind of wide open. Memphis, outside of a couple games, have been struggling. The several teams are 3 or 4 games back. New Orleans had a great opportunity to push forward and get themselves a little bit closer. They weren't able to do that, though. So now they're on the second of a back-to-back. They're on the road. These guys played huge minutes yesterday. 36 for Ingram, 33 for Williamson, 38 for Holiday, 33 for Lonzo Ball. They're all professionals. I'm not too worried about it. I actually think this game stays close throughout, but we'll start with Dallas first because outside of Luka and Porzingis, there isn't a whole lot to break down other than Seth Curry being questionable.
Yeah, exactly. It's so right now Porzingis at 9K. Like I want to get to him in this matchup, but even boosting his minutes too. So giving him 33 minutes, giving him above right around 1.2 fantasy points per minute. It's just really tough to get there, even in a beneficial matchup because of the 9K price tag with Luka active. So I'm going to get a lot of Luka. Luka's ownership right now, if it stays at where it is compared to Giannis is only $500 difference. They project out, I have Giannis for 1 more fantasy point right now. So on paper, I like Luka a little bit more factoring in value. But if Luka's going to be 2 to 3 times as owned as Giannis, I'll get to Giannis at that point. 33 minutes in for Luka. He looks like a fine option otherwise. The rest of this team is really going to come down to what happens with Seth Curry, JJ Barea to an extent because those minutes would get siphoned off. But if you get no Curry today, I think it'll probably make DeLon Wright play upper 20s in minutes. It would make him look more appealing. But for the most part, like usual with this team, really just Luka. And at the price point of Porzingis, not going to get there.
Quickly, where would you rank Luka compared to the rest of the top priced options on today's slate?
Yeah, I'll pull it up now. So I rank Luka as my top pay-up option. And then, so I have Luka at 58.3 fantasy points. I have Giannis at 59.5. So Luka is my top pay-up option, not factoring in ownership right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you're still talking. Oh, by the way, one thing to consider here is the one struggle spot in a huge way for the Pelicans is their is their transition defense. It's been just brutalized all season long. Minnesota beat them up a lot in transition yesterday. So I was curious to see where the Mavericks were in transition scoring this year. They're tied for 29th. Now, that I'm not too worried about it because the pace of play is going to free up more possessions anyway. But yeah, they're one of the lowest frequency teams in transition this season on offense. No one allows more transition points in the league than the New Orleans Pelicans. Usually that's something I like to look at because you look at their personnel. In the half court, they are at least a decent enough defense, right? They haven't been able to contain teams on the run. It's still not going to be enough for me, though. Luka Doncic, a great play. Something that's popped up in chat a couple of times over the past few days is people discussing whether or not Luka's thumb is an issue that we should, or his hand is something that we should. It is his thumb. Sorry, that we should be worried about right now. Is that something you take into consideration?
I saw people mentioning it. Not too much for me. No, I'm not going to factor it in. Like the way that you would factor it in because he's playing normal minutes would just be to lower his just efficiency from shooting and his point per minute production. But I don't think I'm going to do it. Like you see the totals on what happened, and he's playing huge minutes as of late. But you see the totals on what happened in the last game, and it's really just the difference of him like picking up an extra 3 rebounds and hitting the triple double bonus or not. Like he had 30 fantasy points in the first half of their last game, finishes with like mid 40s. So yeah. You just saw him drop a triple double a couple nights back. I'm fine with it. I'm not going to change it for the thumb right now.
I'm not too concerned. Bad shooting happens. Could it be associated with the thumb? Sure, we don't know, but he's like 5 for 31 from 3 over his last 4 games. So yeah, I don't love that. I'm not going to pretend that that's something I feel great about, but I also just have trouble believing that's going to remain the same. So we'll see. Free throw shooting is pretty much in line with where it was. That's good to know. Shot 40+% in every game since returning. I think it'll turn around. 3-point shooting can be very streaky no matter how good you are. So Sal, he starts dropping, when he shoots 10 and only hits 1, he knocks down 4 of those 10 and you're having a completely different conversation. Yeah,
exactly. And like it's clearly like a slump. And I guess if it correlates with people for the thumb injury, that's fine. And like tonight would be the night to take a stance if he's going to be 3 times as owned early on as Giannis.
Because we don't really know.
Yeah, exactly. But like this, we're not talking about a good 3-point shooter anyways. Like at best, Luka is going to shoot 30% in most games from 3 on average, I guess you can say. So like he's obviously well below that. Would you say he's shooting like 16% as of late?
Yeah, 5 for 31 over his last 4 games, which is the ones people are worried about. That's 16%.
Yeah, so I like you said, if he hits literally 3 to 4 more of those, he's hitting his season average. So I'm not too concerned with it right now.
How about the Pelicans? A lot of nights you could go through this starting lineup and find a lot of guys you really like, whether it be Holiday or Lonzo or Ingram or Zion. And granted, you need the price points to be affordable, given that there's a lot of mouths to feed in this team. Is there anyone you really like today against Dallas?
Yeah, so I mean, we saw them all get theirs. Drew Holiday at lower ownership yesterday was fantastic. Chalky Zion pays off. Lonzo continues to be good, but they're all priced at a point now, and like price points come up a little bit since yesterday. Drew 400, Zion 300. They're all priced at a point where it's really hard to parse them apart. They all grade out for pretty much right around 40 fantasy points. Lonzo around 36 for me. So they're all just okay plays. If you give them like 36 minutes instead of 34, they'll look better. So yeah, the starting 4, I think all of them are fine. None of them are priorities. Once again, Zion's probably the one I like the most projection wise, but it also seems like outside of last night's game when it's a 130 team total going into it, it also seems like you're really relying on rebounds and scoring, which he's been able to do pretty easily. But at least out of Drew, you have that triple-double assists upside. Same thing for Lonzo. So I would rank this team right now as, for me, Drew, Ingram, Zion, and Lonzo. Out of those 4, I think Derek Favors, if you want to get to him, is okay. But the price point at $5,500, I'd probably stay away from it now.
Okay. Also,
this team is pretty much since the day Zion has come onto the team to the date, they rank 9th overall in point differential. They're top 10 in offensive scoring and 12th in defensive efficiency. Like they're going to hopefully make the playoffs and be a very good team to watch in them.
Yeah, that's why I was shocked that they dropped a game that should have been a very easy win yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know. But 78% of Zion's shots are coming within 3 feet of the basket this season.
Yeah, like that's
nuts.
Like that's the thing from a fantasy perspective. Like he's exciting to play. Like I'm assuming on Super Draft he's still 1.55x. He just continues. He is at 1.55x. Like that's where he's fantastic to play. 8,000 on DraftKings, you can't go wrong with it. It seems like at worst he's going to get you like 36 fantasy points. But I just question the upside of like his 50+ point days because of the fact that he's not picking up really any steals, any assists. So you're blocking yourself out of, and like the rebounding rates also, it's just fine when you're standing next to Favors and Ingram. So it is very scoring dependent. Like if he's not going out there and scoring 30 to 35, your ceiling in GPPs at 8K, it's just not there as much to what probably the ownership will be.
I agree. Anything else on this one?
No, I think that's it.
Let's close it out. Portland and Washington. And again, hey, if you haven't used the promo code, if you haven't signed up at awesemo.com yet and you want to check it out, use that NBA strategy, one word, to get 50% off your first week. Just go to checkout at awesemo.com/join. Check out everything we have first before you decide to jump in. But when you do, you want to get the ownership, you want to get the player projections, the boom or bust tool, all of our premium articles. You want to get the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, the lineup builder, you name it. Be sure to use NBA strategy, all one word, so you get 50% off your first week. When you do it, you'll feel a whole lot better about that, and we want to do that for you. And if you decide to make that happen, hop into our premium Slack chat, say what's up, talking DFS around the clock over there in the Awesemo Slack chat. All right, Portland and Washington. Let's close it out. Damian Lillard back in action. He's been out for, since the All-Star break. And it's been about 3 total weeks if you're including the All-Star break where there were no games. But he's at $10,000 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's coming in at $9,000 against the Wizards. $9,000 for Damian Lillard. Let's not overlook how well he was playing before that injury. Sure, an ugly game or two, but he was on a meteoric rise. I guess the question now is, dealing with this groin, how many minutes is he going to play? Do you think he's going to be limited? Because $9,000 just seems absurd.
Yeah, I ended up giving him 35 minutes, which normally I'd probably give him 36 or 37 here. So from what I was reading, it seems like he could have, like, if this was the playoffs, he could have played a week ago and probably would have played fine. So I think he's going to have pretty much his full run and if we're not told anything else, I'm going to go ahead and give him 35 minutes. Yeah, and all across the board, he looks good. Like DraftKings, I assume the ownership comes up as people start to remember and realize that he's actually returning today. But like he's less than 1% on the DraftKings. If he stays like 5% or below, I'll just force him into some lineups. On FanDuel, I'm completely fine with that. Probably the best matchup that you can find right now. Washington dead last in defensive efficiency on the entire season. So yeah, Lillard coming back, a 1.3 guy this season. I don't really have a reason in this matchup to think that his efficiency and productivity just drops off a cliff, even though he's been out. It's not like he hasn't been practicing. So yeah, 35 minutes, I think he gets full run unless we're told otherwise. And it seems like he's going to be a low-owned GPP play, and that's probably where I like it most.
Yeah, let's not overlook either that this is a Washington Wizards team that makes for one of the best fantasy matchups in the league. On the season, they're averaging or playing the 5th fastest pace in the league, basically tied with the Rockets for 4th. What separates them, though, is they are dead last in defensive rating on the entire season. It's been a struggle for the Wizards. Yesterday, I watched Giles and De'Aaron Fox and Harrison Barnes drive to the rim untouched when guys like Thomas Bryant were defending the paint. I was shocked at what I was seeing, how easy it was for them to score. And then they Kings ended up going on a late run and pulling away with it because they couldn't stop them. So over the last month, Washington defensively has been better, but I still don't buy into that. I mean, just sit back and I hate to be the guy talking about the eye test, but sit back and watch them. They're still a top 3 pace team over that span. There's just nothing about them that scares me whatsoever. Second of a road back-to-back on the West Coast. No thanks, man. I think this game could get out of hand. We'll see. But if Lillard really is going to come in at that low of ownership, and Terry Stotts knowing how willing he is to run his starters for massive minutes, in the event that Lillard is 100% and he plays big minutes, this might be a spot you want to be on. Anything else for Portland? Or sorry, go ahead, Sal.
Yeah, no, that it's so for the rest of Portland, Ariza playing big minutes at 4,900 in this matchup just looks okay. Nothing of a priority, but yeah, the rest of it doesn't stand out. Obviously, McCollum's they ended up pricing him down, but still not somebody I want to get to. Carmelo, not somebody I want to get to there. So Whiteside 9,500 looks okay for the matchup in 33 minutes. Just a lot of other options at that upper tier that probably have higher ceilings. So Lillard and Ariza from this team for me, both of them GPP options. Lillard, if the ownership starts to come towards like the double digits, I can probably back down from it. But like if you're talking Lillard's going to be 3-4% owned on DraftKings tonight, yeah, getting 10% of that feels pretty good.
All right. Conversations about what type of injury this was in the super chat, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't be starting. If this was something that he was still dealing with, my assumption is that he would not be playing. So
yeah, I agree. And so like the biggest thing for that is like if we get news that he's going to be limited or something, and we should probably get that news if he will be, since he's a high profile player coming back from injury, then I'll lower the minutes to probably. He's a player who plays like 37 to 38 on a normal night. So like 35 is me putting probably a minutes limit on him, but I would probably lower it to like 32 if they said he's going to be on a minutes limit, 30 maybe. But until we hear otherwise, I'll go with it. They said that he practiced and scrimmaged in full the last 3 days at full speed. And then he's been practicing for about a week and a half. So right now I feel pretty good about him in a GPP setting.
We'll see what happens. Damian Lillard called the Trailblazers the last team anyone wants to face in the playoffs. Oh, wow. Man. Fired up, baby. Let's close it out with Washington. Bradley Beal continues to drop 30-plus points a night. The Washington Wizards continue to lose basketball games. That's what it's looked like. Sure, they got a win over Golden State, but it hasn't been pretty. They continue this road stretch on the West Coast. Bradley Beal's now $10,600. If you're wondering where that is in context to the rest of the slate, well, he's almost the same price as Luka Doncic. He's $300 cheaper than Doncic on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, he's $100 cheaper. That's a testament to both how good he plays, or how good he's played, and how difficult it is to roster him right now. But it's deserved. He has played really well, and he's been consistently giving you 50-plus fantasy points with 30+% usage and 35+ minutes every single night.
Yeah, exactly. And so he comes in a spot similar to what we were talking about with Lillard, like not going to be owned in GPPs because of the price point. And median projection-wise, I agree with it. Like he doesn't grade out anywhere near Luka or Giannis in that top range for me. So like if I was to run a crunch and not put any ownership caps or factor that in, I would probably have none of him. But when you're talking about GPPs, yeah, I think having some shares of him is okay, just a really contrarian option. But other than that, he doesn't look that great. Now price up to 10.6, grades out for 52 fantasy points, but relative to some of the other players in that range, it's like 5-6 points less. The rest of this team is really hard to project. I only have 3 guys at 30 or more minutes. Rui and Bertans I have at point on at 30. They both don't look that appealing. The rest of these guys, mid-20s, upper teens in minutes, doesn't look great. The one guy who does stand out is Napier, played 28 in the last game. I put him at 28 once again in this one. It seems like they've been trying to get him there, but whether it's foul trouble, whether it's the game getting out of hand, he's only been stuck at 25 the games before that when he started. So at 28 minutes, it's a good matchup against Portland for him. $5,000 flat, probably my favorite play from Washington.
Who is that?
Napier.
Napier, yeah. By the way, yesterday, Jerome Robinson started the second half, ended up playing 30 minutes.
Saw that.
Huh?
Yeah, I ended up seeing that. I didn't really know what to do with that. I gave him 25, and he kind of looks okay at 3,100.
Yeah, here I'm skeptical because keep in mind they were down by 27 points at halftime. So this could have easily just been Scott Brooks trying to switch something up, and Isaac Bonga isn't exactly a player that is necessarily going to help you. So he came off. Robinson played, but Robinson played 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, more than 20 minutes in the second half alone. So if he does start, if we do in fact see that Scott Brooks is going to go with Robinson instead, then you could probably give him 30 minutes. But that's just a matter of whether or not he starts. And you know what? I'm not sure how much of a difference it's going to make anyway, because Robinson, well, mind you, he is basically the bare minimum, but you're not gonna see. Wow, he's got a big head. You're not gonna get a lot of usage for.
It's not a welcoming picture for him.
Man, that's something else. It looks like when Mars, what is it? Mars Attacks.
I don't know. I don't know what that is.
How old are you?
Oh, wait. Yeah, like the little alien video game or whatever.
No, it was a movie.
Oh, I'm talking about what's the video game? It's like something humans, destroy all humans or something.
I forget. But yeah, Mars Attacks was like this wild. I don't know.
I think he might have something in his, like, maybe he had some sort of surgery. It looks like he's got like it got to be the lighting. They did him bad.
Well, don't make me feel bad now. Anyway, the guy's cheap. If he starts, you probably give him 30 minutes, maybe a desperation play. But one thing to consider, Portland is a pretty bad defensive team, Sal. So someone's going to be scoring for Washington tonight. It's likely going to be Bradley Beal, but I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to get there. Now, I'm seeing that Thomas Bryant is probably not playing today.
Is that true?
I saw at a couple spots that he could be rested. So if that ends up being the case, then things change a little bit. So Mo Wagner's $3,200. He only played 14 minutes yesterday. Jan Mahinmi, another big man for this team, didn't play at all, and he was. I don't think he was healthy. I think he was just a DNP CD. Yeah. So Thomas Bryant played 19 minutes. Let me just take a quick look at this rotation. So Bryant and then Wagner. And then Pasechnik's played 6, Robinson, Bertans, Ish Smith, Troy Brown. So small lineup there. Not really. Pasechnik's come in and played 6 minutes. Thomas Bryant comes back. And then what was the center? Who was at center after that? In the third quarter, was it it was Wagner. Yeah. But for a minute there, it was Bertans. So I have no idea what it's going to look like. But if Bryant's out, you're taking 18 to 20 minutes out of the rotation. You probably give a little to Bertans. Maybe Mahinmi gets back in the lineup. I just don't know if you can do anything with it.
Yeah, so I have Bryant right now for 18 minutes. Doesn't look all that appealing. But yeah, if he's out, I think what I'll end up doing is giving Mo Wagner, I'll put him probably around 20, and then I'll give the rest of those minutes to Mahinmi for like 14. It'll make Mo Wagner look really good at 3,200, and that now explains why the ownership is projected to be pretty high on him.
Anything else for Washington?
No, that's it. So for me, it's Napier looks the best. If you want to, a 1% Beal in tournaments is always fine to have more than, and then, keep an eye on what happens with Bryant.
All right. Hey, thanks for hanging out, fellas and ladies, if you're with us. Well, it's 11:15. Not bad for 9 games in that Boston-Cleveland game.
Yeah, that thing is so. Yeah, like you were saying earlier, if your Wednesday night is filled with any type of plans around lock, just
don't play.
Save yourself the headache.
Yeah, it won't be worth it. Make sure to check out the deeper dive. Make sure to be there for Live Before Lock. We're going to have you covered leading up to this 7 p.m. lock. We've also got other shows today, though. It's Wednesday. You know what that means? You got the NHL picks with Jay Kari. You've got the Awesemo Premium NBA live stream. That's for premium subs. That's with Alex Baker. And you've got PGA picks, but that's going to be, I think that's tonight at 8:30. Yeah, so PGA final picks. Be sure to be around for that while you're sweating your basketball lineups. You've got Ben and Jason that'll take you through all of that. Some great golf analysis that you should be there for. We'll see you back here later today. Remember, hit that thumbs up before you head out. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us as always, and we'll see you back here next time on the Strategy Show presented by Super Draft.